Hi, True Crime Grapevine fans or fans. It's me, Patty Lee. This is the True Crime Grapevine's daily true crime headlines for everything that they've been talking about on the interwebs for the last 24 hours. So, today is Thursday, August 31st, and here's what I have for you. So, there are some crimes that were committed earlier that everybody is still talking about, including the Lucy Letby case that we spoke about, or I spoke about too, whoever is listening. This either last week, she was sentenced on August 21st, and I spoke about it right after that. But now, because it's such a traumatic, horrible crime, she was the UK nurse who was accused and convicted, now going to spend life sentences for murdering, I believe, 7 children, but she was accused, and they think maybe more, but specifically 7 for life. And now all the big channels are talking about it. Stephanie Harlow just did a episode about it. Annie Elise on 10 to Life, and STS Nation did a live about it. So I talked about that case before. It's horrific. Um, Trigger alert. It's about infants. So um, you can go back and look at that, or go to those channels if you want more information. But she was, I don't know if it was Munchausen by proxy, but she was a single, younger woman who, for some reason, liked to be in the mix of drama that occurred on the NICU. And since she worked in that unit, they doubled their statistics on infant deaths. And then she was found to have been the only person who was working. But it took a really long time for the hospital administration to even listen to the investigators they hired before they brought in the police. So this continued to happen for way longer than it needed to, which is horrible. They even stopped accepting critically ill, like very premature babies, only slightly immature babies, because of the high amount of children that were dying. If you have a drink. Mine is vitamin water, but you might need something with these stories. The other thing that we have been talking about is Alec Murdaugh. Alec, even though it looks like Alex Murdaugh, even though it looks like Murdaugh, from South Carolina. I'm sure you remember he was convicted of unaliving his wife and son at their hunting lodge, Moselle, South Carolina. He is the attorney who also is, no, I don't know. I want to say allegedly committed a bunch of crimes, but he also admitted to a bunch of fraudulent, corrupt crimes involving like inappropriate loans, involving judges, other people working in local banks, taking advantage of his own clients, like Tom Giraldi allegedly did. He's trying to get into the federal, those would be federal crimes. And he's been in the news for that, going for his financial crimes being finally adjudicated, even though he admitted during the murder trial on the stand, he admitted to all those crimes. So I'm not sure why they can't just get a summary judgment, because I'm not sure how he's going to say I didn't do it when he claims he did it when he was on trial for murder. But he's in the news for another reason today. Peter Tragos at The Lawyer You Know did a great recap and just spoke about why Alec Murdaugh now can't have. He was found guilty of the exact. Hold on. The exact thing he is guilty is abuse of privileges. And Peter said, and it is kind of very ironic that he's been abusing privilege his whole life, and the privileges that he abused were the jail privileges. So what did he do? He had improper communications using the cover of lawyer confidentiality privilege, and instead he was talking to his lawyer, Jim Griffin, about reading his journal entries that occurred during the trial that Jim Griffin was then allegedly recording and then had given to Fox News Nation for a docuseries they're doing on the trial. So in South Carolina, it's not that you're not allowed to make money off your crimes, but the I mean, that might also be true, but the thing that they said he broke was using his technology. And he also used a PIN number of another inmate. So in doing all this, he they said they don't allow any communications to a news source because victims' rights, part of the victims' rights of a crime is that the convicted person, the perpetrator that hurt their family, is not allowed to get on TV and say whatever he wants to whomever he wants. That's like re-victimizing them. So South Carolina says no. So what did they do? Well, they shut down Alex's tablet and his cell phone. Um, and there's a long story about why he even has a cell phone, but they're allowed to have limited phone privileges to speak with lawyers and such. But he doesn't have that. He doesn't have his tablet to communicate. I think we all saw the top naked picture he took of himself when he was talking to somebody. That's disgusting, in my opinion. Just my opinion. So yes, he will now not be able to use those items for 30 days, and also he can't, and he may never get them back. They'll talk about it, and he also can't buy anything from the commissary or canteen. So apparently Fox News Nation is doing a docu-series on the murder trial, Murdaugh family, and that is also why recently we saw Buster speak first publicly about the Stephen Miller murder and how the allegations of his involvement, and how he said no, that has nothing to do with it. That was also part of this docu-series. So yeah, Alex surprisingly can't follow the rules. Even in prison, he thinks the rules don't apply to himself. All right. There's a new breaking case, somewhat. I heard, see, this is why it's called the Grapevine. So I heard from Andy Elise, 10 to Life, which surprises me because I'm within 500 miles of this location. I'm in the general Michigan, southeastern, northwestern Ohio location. This happened in northeastern Ohio around the city, around Akron area. In Lake Township, Stark County, Ohio, easy for me to say. Melissa and Jason Durham. This family had not been seen for 2 days. So it was after last Monday. So they weren't seen for Tuesday or Wednesday. And by Thursday, because Melissa had not been to work, she was a tax. She had a big job as, in corporate tax, in the corporate tax field. So she worked for a corporation. They had not seen her for 2 days. So by Thursday of last week, which is August 24th, one of her coworkers called the local police for a wellness check. And we know how a wellness check is often how we find out about familicide when a whole family is annihilated. And the police went there. They saw both family cars located in the driveway. Nobody was answering the door. A neighbor by the name of, I think it's Edmund, Mr. Edmund, went over and said, like, they have 2 dogs. So why don't, they can be aggressive. Why don't you let me in? I'll go first. I have the key. So he went. He had known the family as soon as they moved in, before they even had kids. They had 3 children, a 15-year-old Renee, a 12-year-old Amber, and 9-year-old Evan. And if you watch Annie Elise, she does kind of like how Stephanie Harlow, like a big background on the kids. And she said how they were in band. They were on the YMCA swim team, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. I mean, just really, this was a normal, typical family with a mom. She was involved in the Girl Scouting. These people were very part of their community, just like a normal family. So the kids that often were outside doing things too, gardening, taking care of, the flower garden as well as vegetable garden. And they hadn't been seen outside as regularly, Annie Elise reported. That's from the neighbor. And that was unusual because they were kids who were like the oldest girl was known to be a tomboy, and like I said, they were outside helping out all the time, playing as well as helping out in the like with chores. So when they walked into the house, they found all the family members, and again, trigger warning, they were in their beds, they were all shot. Now, Annie Elise said she couldn't confirm, but there are reports that everybody but the father had multiple shots and he had a single shot. Both the mom Melissa and the dad Jason had carry and conceal permits, which isn't unusual, but in Ohio, especially in more rural areas. But they did look obviously at the guns afterwards, and it was Jason's gun who was found to have been fired for all the deaths. So, what happened? They don't know. The police had never been called to the house previously. There was no known domestic violence issues or abuse or problems at the house. So maybe we'll hear more. This just happened a week ago. Obviously, the families are so distraught. Annie Elise reported that she didn't find that much information about Jason, the father, and part of that is because when the obituary came out for the mom and the children, they didn't mention the dad at all, anything about him. And if you know anything about obituaries, that's often where they say survived by, and you can sort of see a family line. They didn't even mention his name, anything about him. We do know that Melissa, she was from the area, and I believe the kids went to the same high school that she went to. So horrible. The school is reeling there because the kids were involved, a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, because those kids were involved in everything. They really, the other kids in the school will need help. And the best friend of the oldest 15-year-old, she had been over to the family's house on Monday night visiting, no problems. And she left a very heartbreaking response about, I'm so glad that you were this best friend, this great friend. I'm so glad that I was the last person to see you. And I will always remember, just heartbreaking. And so this past Saturday night, there was a candlelight ceremony for Melissa's family. And yeah. So we'll probably hear more, maybe. The bad thing, for true crime, usually we wait for a trial, and during a trial we hear and find out more, at least what the police can find out about what went on in forensics and everything. And when we have these family annihilator cases where there's nobody left, there's nobody to prosecute, the family might not want to speak about it, the extended family that's left, so we might not know anything. So that's a horrible case that just happened last week in Northeast Ohio. All right. The last specific thing that I said I'd tell you about yesterday is the mushroom murders. And I thought maybe it was New Zealand. No, it was Australia. It was Melbourne, Australia. Now, this happened. There was a poisoning. Was it accidental? Was it on purpose? Hey, if you like and subscribe, why don't you comment below and tell me if you've heard of this case. What do you think? So let me tell you. Let's get a drink. Let me tell you a little bit about this. So on July 29th, Erin Patterson had invited her estranged husband's in-laws over for a meal, a luncheon. She made beef Wellington, which, if you don't know, I'm sure you can Google it and image it, but it's like a beef roast sort of wrapped in pastry. And very fancy, very difficult to make. If you don't cook a lot. So really nice meal. She had invited Simon, her estranged husband. Now, when this first broke with the idea that it was not accidental, they're like, she was inviting her husband and her in-laws, and she was gonna, her plan was to because she was mad that they were estranged. We don't know that, and it was from one of the more loose with the truth journalistic rags. I'm not going to name it, but they're out there. They tend to be named after objects that are celestial in the sky, or maybe something that just has to do with when you get a letter, those kind of names. But anyway, it was definitely insinuated that she had something to do with it. So here's what we know. So her in-laws were at this meal. The in-laws' sister, so her in-law, her aunt by marriage, and her husband and her children were served beef Wellington. Now, here's what she said. She said, I portioned the meal, put it on plates. Everybody chose their plate. I took the one that was left over, except the children didn't like mushrooms. So they had beef that was without mushrooms. But she said she also ate this meal. When it was originally reported, it was like she served this to those people, but she didn't eat it and her children didn't eat it, which, I mean, they made it sound like they had something different, and very much sounded like, okay, so she did this on purpose. Now, Gail and Don and Gail's sister Heather all died within a week, I believe. So they went home, and there's one person that's still alive. Gail's husband is in the hospital fighting for his life. So on the 29th, they ate this meal. They went home, and within a few hours, they were getting sick. They all went to the hospital, and with the symptoms, they said it was maybe food poisoning. They started to feel better. They went home, and then within a day or two, they got very, very ill and had to go back to the hospital. They went to one hospital, and then they were transferred to a larger hospital. So what happens? What has been conjectured is that Aaron put in death cap mushrooms, which are the most poisonous mushrooms. Now, Australia has so many poisonous things, right? When Aaron was asked about the meal, she did provide the hospital with leftovers, which I find that odd. What do you think? But if you are really going to poison a bunch of people, number one, would you serve it if your ex didn't show up? Because isn't that the person you'd really want to be getting? Unless, I guess, you think he's going to come back to you because he's so sad. I mean, but why would he come back to you if he was so sad about losing his parents, if you were the one who fed them the meal that killed them? So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why she wouldn't, like, oh, it fell on the floor. Sorry, I'll have to feed you something else because Simon didn't show up, if it was really a plan to get rid of everybody. Also, why keep any leftovers? So the problem with death caps are, at first you have mild symptoms, then you get better because it like upsets you, but then it goes into your bloodstream and then it kills you with liver poisoning. So there's like an indeterminate, well, I guess you can determine it. There's a time in between when you feel sick from ingesting it, you feel better, and then you get very, very ill, coma, die. So if she purposefully did it, it's weird to me that she would keep any leftovers and give them to the hospital toxicologist. But who knows? Maybe she wanted to get caught. I don't know. I'm not a criminal psychologist. But that's her story. She said she got the mushrooms she got button mushrooms from the store and some dried mushrooms from an Asian market. So we don't know. This is in Victoria's Gippsland region in Leongatha, if anybody knows around the area. Melbourne was the biggest area nearby that everybody was taken to. So the news that was reported specifically about this, so a number of channels have been talking about this since it happened. She was taken in for questioning. She is not in jail right now, but obviously is a suspect in this. Let's see. The women both died on August 4th, and Dan Peterson died on August 5th. And that's when they started investigating for this death cap mushroom poisoning. But there's a problem. A toxicology expert was reported as saying you need to have blood samples within the first 48 hours to identify if it really was these lethal dead cap mushrooms. So they don't know that it for sure was that. It sounded like, anyways, in the reporting. So, like I said, Erin claims, well, I got these at the store and I got some dried mushrooms from an Asian grocery market in Melbourne. And she doesn't know what happened. The Victoria Police Homicide Squad is still investigating this thing. And again, the problem is that 48-hour window. The toxicology expert said they would need to get the blood samples from as soon as they went to the hospital. And did they do that? Because if someone's living, they typically, those people then were transferred when they degraded to a bigger hospital for better care. And did the first hospital that would have the first 48 hours blood samples, if they even took them, did they keep them? Or did they, he said it's often, if they're living, they'll just get more blood if they need it. They don't keep blood forever from a living person. So the Wilkinsons, the Patterson, the in-laws, Heather Wilkinson passed away. Gail Patterson passed away. Don Patterson passed away, and Ian Wilkinson is still fighting for his life. So, yes, 48 hours. Toxicology said the detectives have. Yeah, so they were in hospital, but he's concerned how likely it was. They had to take specific blood that was monitoring kidney and liver function. And if they did take it, did they keep it? So we'll hear more about this, especially if they do go ahead and prosecute her. But what do you think? And speaking of poisoning, the other little bit of news, I haven't done any deep dive into it, but the other bit of news that is a bit problematic, the dentist in Colorado whose wife died after being in the hospital a number of days, and he had sent poisons to his office that somebody who worked in his office found, and they thought it was in her protein shakes. For some reason now they're saying they found no trace of that poison in those protein shakes. They don't think that's how he poisoned her, so now they're not sure. So I don't know if that means he'll get off. We'll look more into that. But poisoning your spouse instead of divorce doesn't make a lot of sense. Poisoning your in-laws when your estranged spouse isn't there makes even less sense. But again, people, as we know, are crazy. So we have about 5 minutes left. Let me just tell you, there was a great police off the cuff interview last night. So that was August 30th. There was a live, and then Bill Cannon, the retired New York City police officer, just uploaded a little snippet with Jim Clemente. I don't know. Have you heard of Jim Clemente? The name sounded kind of familiar. And Bobby Chacon. They are two retired investigators, but Jim Clemente, I believe, worked for the FBI. Bobby Chacon was New York City, I believe. They both at different times, but then worked together, ended up in Hollywood working for Criminal Minds show as like professional advisors to make sure their storylines were more reflective and accurate. They were on the show talking about the List case, Rex Human, allegedly, who is the man arrested for 3 of the 4 Gilgo 4 beach murders. Jim Clemente actually as an FBI profiler, had a profile written about the suspect way before they caught him. And he described Rex Heuermann. Like, he said, this guy's going to be married. He's going to have a job that requires some level of meticulous attention. He will have a expensive car or truck. He will be a male between the ages of like 20s and mid 40s. And he very interestingly said, he kind of discussed when serial killers start, why it's in their late 20s is when they like first start. Because he said, they build up to this. It's a fantasy that they finally act on, but by the time they get going, they have shown that they have like done some in education, we would say they've developed expertise through deliberate focused practice. So he was talking about the Gilbert Four and how they were found in the duck blinds, how they were wrapped, where they were placed. He said it didn't look like somebody who just started. This didn't look like a young kid. This looked like somebody who was a bit older and somebody who was organized and had developed some expertise. So it's kind of funny because that's exactly who Rex Heuermann turned out to be. So I definitely recommend watching that. STS Nation, that's Joel, that's Surviving the Survivor on YouTube. He is also having a show tonight at 7 o'clock. So right now, I suggest you go watch it, about Rachel Morris, the woman who was recently found unalived in a park in Maryland. And then they found video, after they found DNA that also had accompanying video of a SA attack on it. It's reportedly a 9-year-old girl out in California, and I think in South LA. It's the same DNA. So somehow that guy ended up in Maryland in Bel Air. So in this park on the Mom Paw Trail, and they're going to be talking about that. So they usually have really great guests. I would definitely go watch that. And the last thing is the murder trial of Dr. Amy Harwick that I talked about yesterday, the sex therapist who was also, she had done a lot of shows out in Hollywood. She also had modeled. She was smart, beautiful, even into photography. She was in a decade ago a relationship with a man that she recently saw, and then he unalived her by allegedly strangling her, then throwing her off of her third-story balcony. We're in the second day of trial. Go watch Grizzly True Crime, which is Gisela K. She is breaking it down every day. I highly recommend her channel if you're interested in the nitty gritty, and I will tell you more about what's going on. So right now, prosecution is laying out what happened, and like a friend, I guess, was on the stand today, and it was really heartbreaking and sad. So that's what everybody's talking about on the True Crime Grapevines. I will let you know what happens between tonight and tomorrow at about 6:30. So have a great Thursday. It's really nice and cool here, but I guess we're going to get a heat wave. So stay cool and stay safe. Bye.